Princess Shilara stared out the crystal viewport of the royal palace. The 3 moons of her world hung in the purple sky, but tonight their beauty failed to calm her. Her 4-fingered hand trembled as she brushed back a lock of silvery hair from her violet face. The news she had received only hours ago still felt like a blade in her chest. The door to her chambers slid open with a soft hiss. She did not turn around. "So you have heard," said the deep voice of her father, Emperor Drasker. "Is it true?" Shilara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Emperor moved to stand beside her, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the polished stone floor. "It is. The treaty was signed this morning. You will marry the human diplomat in 7 cycles." Shilara finally turned to face her father. His features, so similar to her own yet hardened by centuries of rule, showed no emotion. The intricate markings on his face, symbols of the royal bloodline, seemed to pulse in the dim light. "Why me? Why not Valisha or Miralan?" She named her older sisters, both higher in line for the throne. "Your sisters are too valuable to the Empire." The Emperor did not soften the blow. "You, with your ideas about cooperation and peace, are the logical choice." The words stung, but Shilara had long grown used to being the least favored child. Still, to be traded away to the humans, the very species that had defeated their mighty fleets in the Orion conflict, felt like the final rejection. "His name is Daniel Wright," her father continued. "A junior diplomat, but one their government claims has studied our language and customs extensively. How kind of them to send someone who can properly explain how they crushed our forces," Shilara said bitterly. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone. This marriage secures peace for our people. Your personal feelings are irrelevant." After her father left, Shilara sank onto her sleeping platform. Marriage to a human, living on Earth, never to return home. The reality of her sentence began to sink in. Daniel Wright straightened his tie for the 5th time and took a deep breath. The State Department briefing room felt too small, too warm, and impossibly intimidating. "Relax, Wright," said Ambassador Carter, a gray-haired woman whose stern expression rarely changed. "You look like you're heading to your execution instead of a diplomatic marriage." "Sorry, ma'am," Daniel said. "It's just ... This wasn't exactly in my career plan when I joined the diplomatic corps." Ambassador Carter's face softened slightly. "None of us expected to win the conflict, much less secure a peace treaty this favorable. Your language skills and your research on Veshkari culture made you the perfect candidate." "Perfect sacrifice, you mean," Daniel muttered, then immediately regretted his words. "I apologize. That was unprofessional." "It was honest," Carter replied. "And between us, I understand your reservations. The Veshkari are not known for their warmth. Princess Shilara is the 3rd daughter, considered something of an outcast in their royal family for her progressive views." Daniel raised an eyebrow. That detail hadn't been in his briefing materials. "Our intelligence suggests she's being punished as much as you're being rewarded," Carter continued. "But that might work in our favor. You'll both be outsiders in your own way." The door opened, and a young aide entered with a tablet. "The final agreement just came through, Ambassador. They've approved the modified ceremony protocols." Carter nodded. "Good, right. You have 3 weeks to prepare. We've arranged for intensive cultural training with Dr. Patel, our leading xenanthropologist. You'll also have daily sessions with the medical team about Veshkari biology and any compatibility issues." Daniel felt heat rise to his face. He'd spent years studying alien languages and customs, but the reality of marrying someone from another species hadn't fully registered until this moment. "One last thing," Carter said as he turned to leave. "This isn't just about the treaty. How you handle this relationship could shape human-Veshkari relations for generations. No pressure." Daniel managed a weak smile before escaping to the hallway. The day of the ceremony arrived too quickly. The grand hall of the Veshkari embassy on Earth glittered with crystal decorations that split light into rainbow patterns across the walls. Human officials in formal attire mingled awkwardly with Veshkari dignitaries in their flowing, metallic robes. In a small preparation room. Shilara sat perfectly still as attendants applied ceremonial markings to her face and hands, the traditional marriage patterns felt wrong, like lies painted on her skin. "The human awaits, Your Highness," announced a court official at the door. Shilara rose, her ceremonial robes heavy on her shoulders. The gravity of Earth made everything feel heavier, a constant reminder of how far she was from home. In another room, Daniel paced nervously. His formal diplomatic uniform felt stiff and uncomfortable. Dr. Patel had coached him on the ceremony, but 1,000 worries raced through his mind. Would he remember the correct gestures? Would his attempt at the Veshkari language sound ridiculous? The door opened, and an aide gestured for him to follow. The ceremony itself passed in a blur for both of them. Shilara performed each ritual movement with cold precision, her face a mask of royal dignity. Daniel followed the choreography he had memorized, aware of every small mistake he made but pushing forward. When they spoke the ritual words, she in perfect English, he in careful Veshkari, their voices echoed in the silent hall. Cameras captured every moment for broadcast across 2 worlds. The final moment required them to press their palms together, 4 violet fingers against 5 human ones. Shilara's skin was cooler than Daniel expected and slightly textured like fine suede. A small shock passed between them at the contact, whether from static electricity or some Veshkari biological response, neither knew. "The union is sealed," declared the Veshkari official and the human judge simultaneously. Later, at the reception, they stood side by side, barely speaking. Diplomats and officials approached with congratulations that rang hollow to both their ears. "You spoke my language well," Shilara said quietly during a rare moment alone. "Few humans bother to learn it correctly." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the comment. "I've studied it for years, though I'm sure my accent is terrible." "It is," she agreed, but without the mockery he expected. "But you attempted our glottal stops." Most humans ignore them entirely. It wasn't much, but it was their first real exchange. As they prepared to leave for the apartment that would be their home, Daniel wondered if that tiny moment might be the foundation for something workable between them. For her part, Shilara had noticed how the human her husband now, strange as that seemed, had incorporated subtle Veshkari gestures of respect into the ceremony. Perhaps he wasn't the arrogant conqueror she had expected. But she reminded herself that this was still exile, still punishment, still a cage, no matter how polite her jailer might be. As they stepped into the transport vehicle, neither looked back at the embassy. Their sentence together had officially begun. The apartment door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a space that was neither fully human nor truly Veshkari. Daniel stepped aside to let Shilara enter first, a courtesy that made her pause briefly before she walked in. "The environmental controls in your room are set to Veshkari standard atmosphere," Daniel explained, pointing to a doorway on the left. "The rest of the apartment stays at Earth normal, but we can adjust if needed." Shilara said nothing as she surveyed the living area. The furniture was a mix of human designs and specially crafted pieces to accommodate Veshkari physiology. The walls displayed digital art that shifted between Earth landscapes and scenes from her homeworld. "I hope it's acceptable," Daniel said. Into the silence. "It is adequate," she replied, her voice flat. Without another word, she entered her room and closed the door. Daniel sighed and sank onto the couch. He hadn't expected warmth, but the cold reality of living with someone who clearly despised the situation hit harder than he'd anticipated. Inside her room, Shilara pressed a hand against the atmosphere control panel, confirming it was indeed set to her world's specifications. The air immediately felt lighter, the slight purplish tint comforting to her eyes. At least here, in this small space, she could pretend she wasn't on an alien planet. She unpacked the few personal items. She'd been allowed to bring a crystal memory cube containing images of her home, a small sculpture that had been in her family for generations, and clothing that would now seem exotic and strange to those around her. The next morning brought their first challenge. Daniel had risen early to prepare breakfast, setting out both human food and what the Earth markets sold as Vishkari cuisine. Shilara emerged from her room and stopped at the sight of the table. "Good morning," Daniel said, attempting a smile. "I wasn't sure what you'd prefer, so I made a few options." She approached cautiously and examined the Vishkari dishes. Her eyes narrowed. "Is something wrong?" Daniel asked. "This is not Vishkari food," she stated. "This is what humans think we eat." Daniel's face fell. "I'm sorry." "The market assured me." "The market knows nothing," she interrupted. "These are poor imitations, like serving a human cardboard and calling it bread?" She turned away from the table and went to the kitchen unit. With quick, efficient movements, she combined several human ingredients in ways Daniel had never seen. Using spices in quantities that seemed alarming, 5 minutes later, she placed a small bowl in front of him. The contents were deep purple and steamed slightly. "This is closer to a traditional morning meal," she said. Daniel hesitated, then took a small bite. The flavor exploded in his mouth, sweet, then savory, then something he couldn't identify. It was strange, but not unpleasant. "It's good," he said, surprised. A flicker of something, perhaps satisfaction, crossed her face before her expression became neutral again. They ate in silence, but it felt less tense than the night before. Their tentative routine was interrupted. 3 days later, when Daniel received an official message. "We've been invited to a diplomatic reception tomorrow evening," he told Shilara. "It's at the Global Relations Center. Many officials will be there, including some from your embassy." Shilara looked up from the datapad she'd been reading. "Is my presence required or merely requested?" "Required," Daniel admitted. "Both our governments want to showcase the success of our arrangement." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then I shall perform as expected." The reception was held in a grand hall with high ceilings and walls of glass that revealed the Seattle skyline. Hundreds of diplomats, officials, and business leaders mingled under soft lighting. As Daniel and Shilara entered, conversations paused and heads turned. "Remember, just an hour," Daniel murmured. "Then we can leave." They moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and fielding questions that danced around what everyone really wanted to know: how was the human-alien marriage working? Daniel handled most of the conversation, with Shilara offering short, formal responses when directly addressed. The trouble began when they met Senator Phillips, a man known for his skepticism about alien relations. "So this is the Veshkari princess," Phillips said, looking Shilara up and down as if examining a specimen. "I must say, after your people's performance in the Orion conflict, I'm surprised you have any royal family left to send us." Daniel tensed. "Senator Princess Shilara is an honored diplomatic envoy and my wife." Of course," Phillips waved his hand dismissively. A lovely gesture of surrender. "Tell me, Princess, how does it feel to know your mighty empire fell to our inferior human technology in less than a year?" The room seemed to grow quiet. Shilara's violet skin darkened slightly, a sign of anger that Daniel had learned to recognize. "Senator," she said, her voice cool and precise, "my people have traveled between stars for millennia while humans were still discovering fire. We have survived wars with species you have yet to encounter. This conflict was but a moment in our history, as it will be in yours." Philip's face reddened. "Is that a threat?" "A historical perspective," she corrected. "One that a true diplomat might appreciate." Before the senator could respond, Daniel smoothly guided Shilara away. "I believe Ambassador Chun is waving us over." Once they were safely across the room, Daniel let out a breath. "That was ... impressive." "He is small-minded," Shilara said. "Such men exist on every world." "Still, you handled him better than most humans would have." Daniel offered a genuine smile. "Though I think we fulfilled our duty for tonight." "Shall we leave?" Outside, rain fell in a gentle mist. Shilara tilted her face up to feel it, a surprising gesture that caught Daniel off guard. "You like the rain?" he asked. "It is different from ours," she said, lighter. "On my world, rain falls in heavy sheets all at once." It was the first personal preference she had shared with him. The following weeks established a cautious pattern. They inhabited the same space but lived separate lives. Daniel worked long hours at the diplomatic office, while Shilara studied human culture through books and videos, rarely leaving the apartment. The protests started a month after their arrival. The first group was small, just a dozen humans with signs declaring Earth for humans and no alien influence. But they returned each day, growing in number, their chants audible even from the apartment on the 20th floor. "Do not concern yourself," Shilara told Daniel when he apologized for the protesters. "My people would do the same if a human lived openly on our world." A week later, the situation worsened when Veshkari protesters joined, not standing with the humans but forming their own opposing group. They carried symbols of the old empire and shouted accusations of betrayal at the building where the princess lived. Security increased around the apartment complex. Shilara was advised not to leave without an escort. Her already limited freedom shrank further. One night, after a particularly loud day of protests, Daniel found Shilara standing at the window, looking down at the now empty street. "I never asked to be here," she said quietly, not turning around. "But neither did I ask to be born royal. Both were decided for me." Daniel moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain distance. "For what it's worth, I think you've shown more strength than anyone had a right to expect." She glanced at him. "And you have shown more respect than I anticipated. Perhaps we are both surprising. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't even truly warmth." But as they stood together looking out at the human city, something between them shifted, like the first crack in a wall that had seemed impenetrable. Daniel sat at his desk, staring at reports about growing tensions between human and Veshkari communities. The protests outside their apartment had finally died down after 3 weeks, but similar demonstrations were happening in other cities. He rubbed his tired eyes and checked the time. He had promised to be home early tonight. At the apartment, Shilara was doing something unexpected. She was cooking. Over the past 2 months, she had slowly begun preparing more meals, finding ways to combine earth ingredients into dishes that reminded her of home. Today, she was attempting to make something for Daniel, a human dish called lasagna, which he had mentioned liking as a child. The apartment door opened just as she was removing the dish from the oven. "I'm home," Daniel called, setting down his bag. He paused when he noticed the smell. "Is that ... "Lasagna," Shilara confirmed, "though I cannot guarantee it tastes correct." Daniel approached the kitchen area, surprise clear on his face. "You made this for me? You have tried my food," she said simply. "It seemed fair to attempt yours." They sat at the table together, something that had become more common recently. Daniel took a bite and smiled. "It's different," he said, "but good. You added something to the sauce?" "A spice blend from the international market," she admitted. "The recipe seemed ... Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that made Shilara tilt her head slightly. Human laughter still fascinated her. "My mother would agree with you," he said. "She always said I liked the most boring food." "You have not spoken of your family before," Shilara noted. Daniel took another bite before answering. "My parents live in Ohio. That's in the middle part of this continent. Dad teaches history, Mom is a doctor. I have a younger sister who's a pilot. And they approved of your marriage to an alien?" Shilara asked directly. Daniel looked up at her. "They were concerned, naturally, but they trust my judgment." He hesitated. "They'd like to meet you someday, if you're ever comfortable with that." Shilara said nothing, but she didn't immediately reject the idea. Progress, Daniel thought. "And your family?" he asked carefully. "Besides the Emperor, I mean." "My mother died when I was young," Shilara said. "My older sisters, Valisha and Marilyn, are both military commanders. We were ... close." "I'm sorry," Daniel said. Shilara gave him a curious look. "Why?" "You did not cause our distance." "It's a human expression of sympathy," he explained. "When someone shares something difficult, we say we're sorry even if we weren't responsible. Humans apologize for many things that are not their fault," Shilara observed. "It is confusing." Daniel smiled again. He caught himself. "Yes, I suppose we do." The conversation was interrupted by Daniel's communication device. He checked the message and his expression grew serious. "There's an emergency meeting at the diplomatic office," he said, standing. "I need to go," Shilara nodded. "Is it about the protests?" "No, something else. I'll tell you when I know more." He hesitated at the door. "Thank you for dinner." After Daniel left, Shilara cleared the table with practiced movements. She had grown accustomed to many human things, their food, their technology, even their strange customs. What she hadn't expected was to grow accustomed to Daniel himself. He was not what she had been taught humans were like. He didn't demand or command, he asked. He listened. He tried to understand her world even as she struggled to understand his. It was unsettling how her perception of him had changed. Daniel didn't return until late that night. Shilara heard him enter and emerged from her room to find him sitting on the couch, his face pale. "What has happened?" she asked. He looked up, startled by her presence. "There was an attack on a Vishkari diplomatic vessel near Mars, and simultaneously, a human research station in your home system was sabotaged." Shilara went very still. "Casualties?" 3 Vishkari crew members died, 7 humans injured, but no deaths. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Both governments are accusing each other of breaking the peace treaty." "War will return," Shilara said, her voice flat. "Not if we can help it," Daniel replied with unexpected firmness. "Our marriage is supposed to be a symbol of peace. We need to make a public statement, together." "You believe they will listen to us?" Shilara asked skeptically. "Maybe not. But we have to try." He stood and faced her directly. "Unless you want the conflict to resume." Shilara met his gaze. "I have never wanted war, Daniel. That is why my father considered me a disappointment." It was the first time she had used his name. The next morning, they appeared together on the global news network. Daniel spoke first, expressing sorrow for the losses on both sides. Then, to his surprise, Shilara stepped forward. "I am Princess Shilara of the Vishkari," she said in clear, careful English. "My people are proud and ancient, but pride should not lead to pointless death. These attacks benefit only those who profit from conflict. I call upon the leaders of both worlds to investigate fully before casting blame." Her words caused a sensation. Never had a member of the Vishkari royal family spoken so directly to humans. Some called it a betrayal of her people. Others praised her courage. In the days that followed, Daniel and Shilara worked together, using their unique position to urge calm and patience. They met with officials from both governments, granted interviews, and made appearances at peace rallies. One evening, exhausted from a long day of meetings, they sat together on their apartment balcony. The Seattle skyline glittered against the night sky. "My father has sent a message," Shilara said quietly. "He says I have brought shame to our bloodline by speaking against war." Daniel turned to her. "I'm sorry, that must be difficult." "Once, his disapproval would have devastated me," she admitted. "Now, I find I value other opinions more." "Like whose?" Daniel asked. She looked at him. "Like mine. And perhaps yours." Comfortable silence fell between them. "The stars look different from Earth," Shilara said after a while, looking up at the night sky. "But they are the same stars." Daniel followed her gaze upward. "Just a different perspective." "Yes," she agreed. "Perspective changes many things." She didn't say more, but when Daniel reached out hesitantly to touch her hand, she didn't pull away. Their fingers, 5 human digits, alongside 4 alien ones, rested together on the balcony rail as they watched the stars. 3 days later, a joint investigation revealed the truth. The attacks had been carried out by a rogue group with members from both species, seeking to restart the war for their own gain. The evidence was undeniable, and the crisis began to ease. That night, as Daniel prepared for bed, a soft knock came at his door. "Come in," he called, surprised. Shilara entered, holding a small crystal cube, the memory device from her homeworld. "I would like to show you something," she said. "Images of my home, if you are interested," Daniel smiled. "I'd like that very much." They sat side by side as images of a violet sky, crystalline cities, and strange, beautiful landscapes appeared in the air between them. For the first time, Shilara spoke freely of her world, her childhood, her dreams before duty had claimed her life, and Daniel listened, no longer as a diplomat or even as a husband, but as a friend. 5 months had passed since the wedding ceremony. The apartment that had once felt like a prison to Shilara now felt like something else, not quite home, but a place where she belonged. The walls that had once been bare now displayed both human art and Veshkari cultural pieces. The kitchen contained spices from both worlds. Even the furniture had been rearranged to better suit their shared living. Daniel entered the apartment, his face serious. Shilara looked up from the datapad she was reading and immediately sensed something was wrong. "What has happened?" she asked. "I've received intelligence from a contact in your embassy," Daniel said, sitting down across from her. "Your sister Miralon is leading a faction that wants to break the peace treaty. They're calling your public statements treason." Shilara's face remained calm, but her fingers tightened on the datapad. Miralon has always sought father's approval through military glory. Peace gives her no chance to prove herself. "There's more," Daniel continued. "We've discovered a human group working with them. They're planning something big, possibly an attack that would be blamed on your people. How did you learn this?" Shilara asked. "I have a friend in intelligence, Steve. Mason, he's been tracking unusual communications." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Shilara now recognized as stress. "The problem is, we don't have enough proof to take to either government." Shilara stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city she had come to know. "If war returns, all of this was for nothing. Our marriage, the treaty, the lives already lost? I won't let that happen," Daniel said firmly. He hesitated, then added, "We won't let that happen." Shilara turned to face him. "What do you suggest?" "We need more information. Steve can only access human communications. We need someone on the Veshkari side." "I may know someone," Shilara said after a moment. "My former tutor, Kelvith. He serves in the embassy now and has always been loyal to me, not to my father's military ambitions." Daniel nodded. "Can you contact him safely?" "Yes. He gave me a secure communication device before I left our world. I have not used it yet." That night, they formulated a plan. Shilara would reach out to Kelvith while Daniel worked with Steve. Together, they might gather enough evidence to present to both governments. 3 days later, Daniel arrived home late to find Shilara waiting for him. Her normally violet skin seemed paler, and her silver hair was tied back severely. "Kelvith confirmed our fears," she said without preamble. "Miralon has formed an alliance with humans who profit from military contracts. They plan to stage an attack on a major human city and make it appear as if Vishkari extremists are responsible." Daniel sat down heavily. "Steve found similar evidence. They're calling themselves Purity Alliance, humans who believe any contact with alien species weakens humanity. When will they act?" Shilara asked. "Soon, within days." Daniel looked at her directly. "We need to take this to the highest levels of both governments immediately." Shilara shook her head. "My father will not listen without absolute proof. And from what you've told me of your leaders, they are equally stubborn." "Then what do we do?" Daniel asked, frustration clear in his voice. Shilara was silent for a moment. "We gather the proof ourselves." The next day, they began their dangerous work. Using Kelvith's access and Steve's intelligence connections, they identified key members of the conspiracy. Daniel called in favors from diplomatic contacts while Shilara used her royal credentials to access restricted information. They worked side by side in their apartment, converting the living room into an investigation center. Data screens displayed information in both human and Veshkari languages. They took turns sleeping, always ensuring one of them was monitoring communications. On the third day, a breakthrough came. Kelvith sent a recording of a meeting between Miralon and a human businessman named Alan Reeves. "The explosives will be delivered tomorrow," Reeves said in the recording. "Once the attack occurs, your forces will be ready to respond to the human aggression." "My ships wait at the edge of your system," Miralon confirmed. "Father believes they are conducting routine exercises. He knows nothing of our plans. Daniel and Shilara looked at each other. This was the proof they needed. They were preparing to send the evidence when alarms suddenly blared through the apartment. The security system had been breached. They know, Daniel said, quickly gathering the data drives. We need to leave now. Shilara moved to a hidden panel in her room and retrieved a small Veshkari weapon. There is an emergency exit through the maintenance shaft. The apartment door exploded inward. 4 figures rushed in, 2 humans in black tactical gear and 2 Veshkari warriors in combat armor. Daniel pushed Shilara behind him, but she stepped forward instead, raising her weapon. Stand down, ordered one of the humans. By order of Earth Security? You are not Earth Security, Daniel replied calmly. You're Purity Alliance. And your Veshkari friends are my wife's sister's loyal soldiers? The intruders hesitated, surprised by Daniel's knowledge. In that moment of confusion, Shilara fired her weapon, not at the attackers, but at the ceiling. A flash of energy triggered the building's fire suppression system. Thick fog filled the room, obscuring vision. Daniel grabbed the data drives in Shilara's hand. Together they ran for the maintenance shaft as shots and energy blasts flew around them. They escaped into the rainy Seattle night, hunted by both their species. We need somewhere safe, Daniel said as they hurried through back alleys, avoiding main streets and security cameras. Not your government buildings or my embassy, Shilara replied. We don't know how far the conspiracy reaches. Daniel thought quickly. I know someone we can trust, Dr. Lavra Simmons. She's a xenobiologist who's always advocated for peace. Her lab is across the city. They traveled cautiously, using public transportation and changing routes several times. The rain helped conceal Shilara's alien features, though they still drew curious glances at Dr. Simmons' lab. They were met with initial shock but quick acceptance once they explained the situation. You can use my secure communication system, Dr. Simmons offered, leading them to her office. It's designed for transmitting sensitive research data. As Daniel prepared the evidence for transmission, Shilara stood apart, looking out at the rain-soaked city. Are you all right? Daniel asked, joining her. My own sister tried to have me killed, she said quietly. And your people, some of them, would destroy peace for profit. Daniel gently touched her arm. And yet here we are, a human and a Veshkari. Working together, Shilara looked at him. When I came to Earth, I thought this marriage was my prison. Now I find it is the conspirators who are imprisoned by their hate, their greed, their fear of difference. And you? Daniel asked softly. Are you still imprisoned? Shilara's 4-fingered hand moved to cover his. No, not for some time now. Dr. Simmons called them back to the communication system. It's ready. Where will you send the evidence? Daniel looked at Shilara. Everywhere. Every news outlet, every government official, every public forum. Too many people to be silenced. The truth needs to be seen by all. Shilara nodded, impressed. The transmission button, their private battle, had just become very public, and there was no turning back. The days following their broadcast were chaos. News channels across Earth and the Veshkari Empire exploded with the evidence Daniel and Shilara had gathered. The recordings of Miralan and Alan Reeves planning their attack played on repeat. Public outrage grew on both worlds. Daniel and Shilara remained in hiding at Dr. Simmons' research facility, watching events unfold from a small room filled with monitoring equipment. The human authorities have arrested Reeves and 6 other members of the Purity Alliance, Daniel reported, reading from a news feed. And listen to this, your father has placed Miralan under house arrest pending an imperial investigation. Shilara looked up from her own screen. He had no choice. The evidence was too clear and it was seen by too many people. Even an emperor cannot ignore such public knowledge. Do you think it's safe for us to come out of hiding now? Daniel asked. Before Shilara could answer, Dr. Simmons entered the room. You have visitors, she said, her expression concerned. Official ones. A human diplomatic security team and 2 Veshkari royal guards. Daniel and Shilara exchanged glances. Are they here to arrest us or protect us? Daniel wondered aloud. Let's find out, Shilara said, standing tall as she had been trained to do since childhood. But we go together. They walked side by side into the main laboratory. 4 humans in formal security uniforms stood with 2 tall Veshkari in the distinctive armor of the Royal Guard. One of the humans stepped forward. Mr. Wright, Princess Shilara, we've been sent to escort you to an emergency joint session of the Human Veshkari Peace Council. Are we accused of something? Daniel asked. Directly, no, sir, the security officer replied. You're being called as honored witnesses. Your evidence has prevented a disaster. The trip to the Peace Council building was tense but uneventful. As their vehicle approached, they saw crowds gathered outside humans and Veshkari together, holding signs with messages of peace in both languages. They support us, Daniel said in surprise, looking out at the crowd. They support peace, Shilara corrected him, but she took his hand as she said it. Inside the council chamber, representatives from both species sat in a large circular room. At the center was a table with 2 empty chairs. Daniel and Shilara were led to these seats, facing the entire assembly. Ambassador Carter, who had first assigned Daniel to the marriage arrangement, stood to address the room. Princess Shilara and Diplomat Wright, your actions have exposed a conspiracy that threatened the peace between our worlds. You acted without official sanction, but with great courage. A Veshkari counselor named Trelver rose next. You have done what our formal diplomatic channels could not. You have shown true cooperation between our species. For the next hour, Daniel and Shilara answered questions about how they discovered the plot and gathered their evidence. They spoke honestly about their initial reluctance to work together and how that had changed over time. Princess Shilara, asked a human representative, your sister faces serious charges on your homeworld. Do you wish to speak against her? Shilara, sut straighter. My sister acted from misguided loyalty, the old ways of thinking. I ask for justice, not vengeance. And Mr. Wright, said a Veshkari counselor, some humans call your actions treason for working so closely with a Veshkari against human interests. How do you respond? Daniel looked directly at the counselor. I acted in humanity's true interest peace. The real traitors were those willing to sacrifice innocent lives for profit and power. As the session concluded, Ambassador Carter approached them privately. You've both done remarkable work. The Council is prepared to offer you new positions separate, but prestigious roles in the diplomatic service. Daniel felt a strange tightness in his chest at the word separate. What roles? Shilara asked, her voice carefully neutral. For you, Princess, a position as senior cultural envoy to Earth with diplomatic immunity and freedom to travel between worlds. Carter turned to Daniel. And for you, a promotion to lead diplomat for the new joint colony on Proxima Centauri. That's across the galaxy from Earth? Daniel said quietly. Yes, Carter agreed. It's a great honor. You'd be working with the Veshkari colonists there using your unique experience. When do you need our answer? Shilara asked. The council meets again in 3 days, Carter replied. Think it over carefully. That night, Daniel and Shilara returned to a new apartment. Their old one had been destroyed in the attack. The space was temporary, with basic furnishings and none of the personal touches they had added to their previous home. They sat in silence for a long while, each lost in thought. The positions they offered would advance both our careers, Daniel finally said. Yes, Shilara agreed. You would lead an important mission. I would have freedom I never expected. On different worlds? Daniel added. Another silence fell between them. When I first came to Earth, Shilara said slowly, I saw our marriage as a sentence. A punishment, Daniel nodded. I know. I felt trapped too, in a different way. And now? She asked, looking at him directly. Daniel met her gaze. Now I can't imagine accepting a position that would take me away from you. Nor can I, Shilara admitted softly. 3 days later they stood again before the Peace Council. Ambassador Carter looked expectantly at them. Have you reached decisions about the positions offered? Daniel and Shilara exchanged a glance before Shilara spoke. We have a counterproposal. A murmur ran through the chamber. Instead of separate roles, Daniel continued, we propose establishing a new cultural exchange initiative, a program that would bring humans and Veshkari together to learn from each other, not just through formal diplomacy, but through art, science, education, and daily life. And who would lead this initiative? Trelver asked. We would, Shalara said firmly, together. The council debated their proposal for hours, but eventually agreed. The new initiative would be based on Earth, but would include regular travel to the Veshkari, homeworld, and joint colonies. 1 month later, they stood on a stage at the official launch of the Cultural Exchange Initiative. Hundreds of humans and Veshkari filled the audience, and millions more watched the broadcast across both worlds. A reporter approached them after the ceremony. Princess Shilara, when you first came to Earth, your marriage was widely seen as a diplomatic sentence. Do you still see it that way? Before Shilara could form a diplomatic answer, Daniel surprised her by responding in perfect Veshkari. He used an old idiom from her world that roughly translated to, what begins as duty can grow into choice. The Veshkari in the audience gasped, then broke into appreciative murmurs. Shilara actually laughed, a sound few had ever heard from the serious princess. Later that evening, they stood on the balcony of their new permanent home. It was a house on the outskirts of the city with room for both human and Veshkari design elements. Through the windows came the soft lights of Seattle, and above them shone the stars that connected their worlds. Did you mean what you said today? Shilara asked. About duty growing into choice? Daniel took her hand, their different fingers now fitting together comfortably. I meant every word. What began as an arrangement has become my choice. I would choose you again, Shilara. She moved closer to him, her violet face serene in the starlight. As would I, Daniel. What was once my sentence has become my freedom. Above them, the stars of two worlds twinkled in the same sky, no longer distant and separate, but part of the same vast universe that had brought them together.